Let's get this out of the way. Blizzard Activision is a toxic, deeply poisoned corporate gargoyle that has let its leadership structure ruin careers and lives and hurt people in ways that are not acceptable ever. I have nothing positive to say about the company or its practices, particularly in its latest incarnations and given the latest news and scandals about what's happened inside company walls. If you're not comfortable with the discussion of a game produced by such a corporation, I don't blame you at all for skipping this one. Diablo 2 might be the game I've played the most in my life. I played the hell out of it upon its first release in June of 2000, played well beyond boredom after the release of its expansion, Lord of Destruction, in November 2001, picked up the game more than a few times in the intervening years using various community-built enhancements to see more of the game than I'd ever been able to as a younger player, and in recent weeks I've been diving back in via the remaster, Diablo 2 Resurrected, released by Blizzard Activision, but primarily developed by Vicarious Visions, who also worked on the Tony Hawk 1+2 remaster earlier this year. Diablo 2 Resurrected is a very specific kind of success. It makes a game I played in 2000 look like a game that deserves to have been released in 2021, while still feeling completely of a piece with the memories of the game I have from 2 decades ago. It doesn't just upscale graphics, and it doesn't muck with mechanics that already work. Instead, it carefully applies a beautiful coat of paint and tweaks some of the gears enough to make things smooth. But let's set 2021's remake aside, and even 2001's expansion, and go back to Diablo 2's original release. Diablo 2, like its predecessor, is an action role-playing game heavily focused on hacking and slashing through semi-randomized dungeons, collecting random loot. You'll play the same maps again and again, looking for that slightly better belt or the right attribute for a wand that will fit your chosen playstyle. Success in the game is all about doing the same things repeatedly for marginally improved rewards. It's a shockingly modern feedback loop. It's like Blizzard North, the developers of the original 2 Diablo games, had tapped inadvertently into the predatory mobile game mechanics and microtransactions that plague the games industry today and hooked them in during an era in which the most predatory parts were hardly a twinkle in anyone's eye. It's also a distinctly anti-narrative gameplay loop. Diablo 2 is structured into 4 acts, like a screenplay. On your first playthrough with a given character, you'll move through these acts sequentially, reaching a climactic boss fight at the end before being shuttled on to the next location and act. Once you've completed that playthrough though, and the game is built for that first run through to be, if not ridiculously easy for a new player, still very manageable even if you have no understanding of the game's mechanics or secrets, the game opens up. You can jump from act to act, location to location, refighting bosses and restaging climaxes however you like. Killing the same end boss again and again takes the wind somewhat out of any attempt to build up to that fight as having meaningful narrative stakes. The gameplay loop is about quick, short, and semi-predictable bursts of satisfaction, more dopamine-hitting pulls on a slot machine than the slow building tension of a sporting match or a good novel. For comparison, Diablo 3, this game's 2012 successor, failed pretty completely to understand that potential for failure. The story in Diablo 3 is a repeated disaster of forcing players to interact with a silly, meaningless story that force stops the action to explain itself on each playthrough. As if to admit the degree of this failure, later patches for the game introduced the ability to completely sidestep the narrative structure once a player completed the narrative once with any of their characters. Even in its modern resurrected form, Diablo 2 doesn't quite have as free-flowing a structure as that patched version of its sequel, but it's not necessary, because Diablo 2 never tries to railroad its players into a story they don't care about. All in-game dialogue is skippable at all times. You can follow a line from the quest screen if you need to know where to go next, or just rely on muscle memory if you've played enough times. All the cinematics, the one place where Diablo 2 does focus on story, are also skippable, and they're completely inessential to understanding what you're doing or where you're going. Here's the thing about those cinematics though, they're fantastic. Diablo 2's cutscenes do something amazing that I'm not sure any game has really done before or since. They tell a story orthogonal to the players, and feature a central character who never appears in-game and never interacts with the player character. Instead of trying to build a narrative arc around your custom avatar, Diablo 2's cutscenes tell a side story about a smaller tragedy that runs alongside, but not inside, of that 4-act structure. Quick explanation for the uninitiated. Diablo 2 is a gothic horror game about fighting the 3 brothers who rule hell, one of whom is the titular Diablo, aka Satan, more or less. There is a lot of lore and window dressing for the universe beyond that, but it's all completely ignorable and more about aesthetic than narrative importance, which is another thing Diablo 3 screws up, much to its detriment. You are a hero who is guided by various wizened or angelic citizens along a path to defeat those 3 brothers and save the world from damnation. Your story, to the extent you have one, is largely person arrives in location, wins the trust of locals by completing quests, defeats some great nemesis, and moves on with all the more glory. It's a constant upward ladder. In the cutscenes, though, Diablo 2 becomes a story about poor old Marius. Marius is first seen mumbling to himself in a prison or an asylum, driven near mad by his experiences. He recognizes a stranger who approaches him as an angel who had asked once for his help, and Marius breaks down sobbing as he tries to explain why he failed to help as he was asked. His explanation forms the narrative arc of the cutscenes. In his voiceover narration, Marius recalls following a dark wanderer along a path similar to that taken by the hero, though clearly taken sometime before your player character. What's compelling about Marius, and why he works as a narrator in a story with this aesthetic, in a way your player character might not, is that he is completely overwhelmed and not suited for the task to which he has been assigned. He very rightly finds everything about what he sees and experiences to be terrifying, and ultimately his terror gets the best of him, in a way that's completely understandable considering he's a nobody, but that also leads inexorably to his final, tragic fate. Marius was voiced by the late Frank Gorshin, who was actually nominated for an Emmy for playing the Riddler back on the 60s live-action Batman series, starring Adam West. He's a force of nature in Diablo 2, giving Marius' narration an incredible weight of sadness and trauma.
Take it. I'm glad this is finally over, Tyrael. Look what the stone has done to me.
His work is aided by perhaps Diablo 2's greatest triumph, a background musical score by Matt Wellman that takes the moody, macabre vibes of the first Diablo and matches them across an even wider variety of aesthetics and moods and landscapes without ever losing the thread of larger dread. And though the remake's update of the visuals in these cinematics are lovely, the original turn-of-the-century CGI work has a weird, specific charm and detail all its own. Marius' drooling madness at the beginning, the vacancy of his eyes replaced later by shock and horror. It's all sold somehow even better by the uncanny quality of that earlier era computer animation. Now, the result of all this isn't necessarily a masterpiece of storytelling. After all, these cinematics are still part of what is ultimately a pretty silly and over-the-top gothic video game vibe, with muttering about soul stones and portals and other such game mechanic MacGuffins. But nonetheless, for something that very easily could have felt entirely inessential, and which genuinely is inessential from a mechanical standpoint, this nasty little side story is executed with such gusto and confidence that it gives Diablo 2 an edge of horror and danger that it can only find so much with its gameplay loops. It's telling ultimately that even as I revisit this game decades later, I'm still enthralled by these cinematic sequences just as much as the potential for the next loot drop.